Imagine a simple scene. An 18-year-old girl, full of dreams, puts on her running shoes, says goodbye to her family, and goes out for a quick jog in a quiet small town in rural Washington. It was Thanksgiving Day, 1989, a time when families came together to celebrate, to share stories, and to give thanks. But that afternoon, Mandy Stavik's life would take a brutal and irreversible turn. Her dog came back home alone. Mandy did not. And so began one of the most shocking and disturbing crimes the state of Washington had ever witnessed. This is a story of a young woman full of life, ripped away from her future in the cruelest way, in a community that spent decades searching for answers, a mystery that seemed impossible to solve, until a casual conversation between two mothers at a water park reopened the door to truth. But before we dive into this story marked by pain, silence, and delayed justice, let me invite you. Subscribe now to Dr. Investigation and turn on the notification bell. Here, we reveal the untold stories behind real crimes the world will never forget. Your subscription helps us continue bringing deep, investigative content, stories that deserve to be told. Now get ready, because what you're about to hear is not just a crime story. It's a memory of a life interrupted, and the fight for justice that lasted 3 decades. Before we talk about the crime, it's essential to remember who Mandy Stavik was, because behind the headlines, there was an 18-year-old girl, full of life and with a promising future. Mandy was charismatic, well-liked by everyone in her small community of Acme, Washington. In the school hallways, she was remembered for her easy smile, her generosity, and her determined way of facing challenges. A dedicated athlete, she had a passion for running, swimming, and softball. She wasn't only an outstanding student, but also a loving daughter, a protective sister, and a loyal friend. She had just graduated from high school and taken her next step, enrolling in college. Her plans went far beyond the mountains and rural roads of her hometown. Mandy dreamed of building a career, exploring the world, and living every achievement to the fullest. At that point in her life, she was in the prime of her youth. She had ambition, talent, and people who believed in her. She was a kind of presence that lit up a room, someone who inspired trust and hope. And perhaps that's what makes her story even more heartbreaking. A life that seemed destined for great accomplishments was cut short in the cruelest way, leaving not only a devastated family, but an entire community scarred by the loss. The memory of Mandy is not only that of a victim of violence, but of a vibrant young woman, full of energy and dreams. And that is why, even decades later, her name continues to echo strongly as a symbol of injustice, but also a perseverance in the search for truth. It was November 24th, 1989. Thanksgiving Day dawned quietly in Acme, a small community in Whatcom County, Washington. While families across town prepared festive meals, 18-year-old Mandy Stavik held on to a routine that had become part of who she was, going out for a run. Shortly after the family's holiday lunch, Mandy put on her running clothes, tied her shoelaces, and set out with her German shepherd, Kyra. To the neighbors, this was a familiar sight. She often used the rural roads for training, enjoying the peaceful scenery and the sense of freedom her runs brought. Her usual route was short, about 3 kilometers, stretching to the main road and looping back home. For Mandy, a dedicated athlete brimming with energy, it was little more than a warm-up. Everything suggested it would be just another ordinary run. But that afternoon, fate would take a far darker turn. Hours passed. The silence at home was broken by the sound of the door opening. Kyra had returned, alone. The dog looked restless, panting heavily, but Mandy wasn't with her. The family immediately sensed something was wrong. It made no sense. Mandy would never leave the dog behind, and above all, she would never be gone this long without a word. Concern quickly turned into action. At first, they thought it might have been an accident, perhaps a twisted ankle, a fall, or even a fainting spell along the route. Mandy's mother began calling friends, neighbors, anyone who might have seen her. But with each passing minute, the situation grew more terrifying. No one had seen her come back. No parked cars. No cries for help. No trace at all. It was as if Mandy had been swallowed by the silence of those country roads. As darkness fell, worry became despair. What at first seemed like a simple delay now felt like a nightmare. Word spread quickly through community, and soon dozens of people joined the search, carrying flashlights, driving along back roads, combing through fields and trails with search dogs. Acme, a town used to rural calm and safety, had never experienced anything like this. Mandy's absence created a suffocating atmosphere. Fear that something terrible had happened mixed with fragile hope that she might still be found alive. And on that cold, dark November night, one question echoed in everyone's mind. Where was Mandy Stavik? The first hours after Mandy vanished were filled with restless hope. Many believed she might have suffered a simple accident, perhaps a fall during her run, or even a twisted ankle that had kept her from returning home. The image everyone clung to was of finding her conscious, shaken but alive. Very quickly, the search grew into something Acme had never seen before. The small rural community, where everyone knew each other by name, became a true field of operations. Local police organized teams that combed every dirt road, every hidden trail between the trees. Flashlights cut through the darkness of those November nights, while search dogs picked up scents that soon faded into nothing. Helicopters circled overhead, casting beams of light across fields and streams, desperately searching for any trace of the missing young woman. Volunteers left their homes to join in. Farmers, shopkeepers, homemakers, all driven by the same sense of urgency. It was as if the entire town had stopped its life to look for Mandy. But as the days went by, no answers came. And with each passing hour, hope was slowly consumed by dread. Acme, once defined by its calm and safety, began to feel the weight of an invisible threat. If Mandy had been taken, it meant someone among them was capable of unimaginable cruelty. Trust between neighbors gave way to suspicion, and the silence of the nights became suffocating. On the third day of searching, fate revealed its cruelest face. Mandy's body was discovered along the banks of the Nooksack River, just a few miles from where she had disappeared. The news spread like lightning, striking families who still clung to that last thread of hope. The autopsy confirmed what everyone feared. Mandy had been raped and then drowned. This was no accident, no tragic misstep. It was a cold, deliberate, brutal crime. The community fell into shock. Mandy's funeral drew hundreds of mourners, one of the most painful gatherings Acme had ever seen. It was not only a farewell to a young woman full of promise, but also the loss of a sense of safety that had once defined life in that town. From that day on, Acme would never be the same. The river that flowed peacefully through the valley ceased to be a simple backdrop, and instead became a haunting reminder of human brutality. And in the heart of every person there was born a silent promise to uncover who had done this, and to ensure Mandy would not be remembered only as a victim, but as a symbol of the fight for justice. After Mandy Stavik's body was discovered, police intensified their investigation. They questioned neighbors, former classmates, family acquaintances. No detail was considered too small. Anything could hold the key to the truth. DNA samples were collected, suspects were interviewed, and theories were formed. But time was not kind. Despite the authorities' efforts, nothing seemed to fit. The technology of the time was still limited, and although genetic material had been preserved, there were no databases advanced enough to provide an effective match. The evidence remained stored away, like puzzle pieces that refused to come together. The frustration was palpable for the Stavik family. Each day without answers was another weight on their hearts. For the Acme community, the sense of safety seemed ripped away. People no longer walked alone at night, and parents no longer allowed their daughters to run along country roads. Fear had rooted itself into daily life. As months went by, the headlines faded. The case that had once shocked the entire state slowly disappeared from the newspapers. What was once a top priority became just another file gathering dust on a shelf of unsolved crimes. Silence began to take over. The absence of answers turned into disbelief. Some came to believe that justice would never be served, that Mandy's killer had slipped forever into the shadows of anonymity. Yet even in the darkness, there were those who did not give up. Veteran investigators kept the case alive in their minds, periodically revisiting the evidence. And above all, the Stavik family never allowed Mandy's memory to be forgotten. Every birthday, Every anniversary was marked not only with grief, but with a silent hope that one day, the truth would finally emerge. Mandy Stavik's case had gone cold, but it was far from closed. Decades had passed since the murder of Mandy Stavik. The pain was still there, but for many, the case seemed destined to remain unsolved. Then, in 2013, a simple conversation changed everything. That summer, two women, Heather Backstrom and Marilee Anderson, were at a water park with their families. Amid laughter and casual talk, the name of the man known to both of them came up: Timothy Bass. Heather mentioned unsettling experiences with Bass, memories of strange and inappropriate behavior. Marilee, surprised, revealed that she too carried similar stories. What began as a casual exchange of uncomfortable recollections soon took on greater weight. Both women were thinking of the same man, a man who had never been seriously tied to Mandy's murder. This chance encounter, born from a conversation between two mothers in an everyday setting, became the spark that reignited the investigation. Bass, a former neighbor of the Stavik family, suddenly fit into a puzzle that had remained incomplete for decades. He had always been quiet, almost invisible, but his silent fixation on Mandy, recalled years later by those who knew him, now carried a sinister relevance. The two women decided to act. What could have remained as whispered confessions turned into decisive action? Their concerns reached law enforcement, and for the first time in over 20 years, the police turned their eyes back to Timothy Bass as a possible suspect in the crime that had haunted the community for so long. This wasn't just another lead. It was proof that even after decades of silence, truth can surface from the most unexpected places. Sometimes, all it takes to reopen a wound is the courage to say out loud what many would rather keep buried. When Timothy Bass's name reached investigators, something felt different. He wasn't a stranger. He had been a neighbor of the Stavik family at the time of the crime, but he had never been a primary suspect. Now, with women coming forward about disturbing memories of the behavior, police had a real reason to revisit the past. Detectives knew that time was against them. More than 2 decades had passed. Witnesses had moved on with their lives. Memories had faded. But one piece of evidence remained untouched. The DNA collected from Mandy's body in 1989. That silent proof had been waiting all along, needing only the progress of science to finally speak. The challenge was clear. How could they obtain a sample of Timothy Bass's DNA without alerting him? The law didn't allow them to force a collection without a warrant, and securing that warrant required preliminary evidence they didn't yet have. That's when an audacious plan emerged. A bakery employee quietly cooperated with police, collected items Bass had discarded: a plastic cup, a soda can, ordinary objects to him. But to investigators, they represented a chance to confront the past with the present. The samples were sent to the lab. Days of anxious waiting followed, until the results finally arrived. Timothy Bass's DNA was a perfect match to the genetic material found on Mandy Stavik. After nearly 30 years, the shadow hanging over Acme suddenly had a face. What had long been only a painful mystery now became a certainty. Mandy's killer had been identified. In December 2017, nearly 3 decades after the murder of Mandy Stavik, police finally knocked on Timothy Bass's door. News of his arrest rippled through the community like a shockwave. Many knew him as an ordinary man, a worker, a husband, a father. For some, it was unthinkable to link him to such a brutal crime. For others, it wasn't surprising at all. There had always been something unsettling about his presence, a shadow that seemed to follow him everywhere. In court, the case took on an even more intense dimension. The defense fought desperately to discredit the evidence. They argued that the DNA could have been transferred by accident, that there were no eyewitnesses, that memories had grown fragile after so many years. But none of that could erase the weight of science. DNA doesn't lie, and it was there, preserved on Mandy's body since 1989, waiting for the moment to reveal the truth. The trial brought forth painful details. Family members, friends, and community residents relived the trauma, speaking of the wound that had never healed. The weight of Mandy's absence could be felt in every testimony, in every tear shed before the jury. Finally, in May 2019, after intense days in court, the verdict arrived. Timothy Bass was found guilty of first-degree murder, kidnapping, and sexual assault. The sentence was clear and definitive: 27 years in prison. For the Stavik family, it wasn't a complete victory. No conviction could bring Mandy back. But at last, there was an answer. The certainty that her killer had been identified and removed from society brought a bitter, yet necessary sense of relief. For the community of Acme, Bass's imprisonment marked the end of a collective nightmare. The case that had haunted the town for nearly 30 years had finally been brought to justice. Delayed though it was, justice had prevailed. The murder of Mandy Stavik is not just a story of a brutal crime. It is a reminder how life can be cruelly cut short, and how justice, even when delayed, can turn silence into answers. For nearly 30 years, the Stavik family carried an open wound. Every birthday, every Christmas, every Thanksgiving, Mandy's absence was there. For the community of Acme, the case became a constant shadow, a reminder that even in the quietest places, darkness can exist, but persistence prevailed. The progress of science and the courage of two women who refused to remain silent show that no matter how distant the truth may seem, always finds a way to surface. Nothing can erase the pain of a life lost. Yet Timothy Bass's conviction brought closure to a decades-long wait. It proved that Mandy was never forgotten, and that her memory continues to live on as a symbol of resilience and the fight for justice. And perhaps that is the most powerful lesson of her story. Time can fade headlines, it can weaken memories, but it will never silence the pursuit of truth. The case of Mandy Stavik shows us that truth may take time, but it never disappears. A young woman full of life had her future stolen in the most brutal way, and for years it seemed as though silence would prevail. Yet science, courage, and persistence prove that no secret lasts forever. Stories like Mandy's remind us of the fragility of life, but also the power of justice. Even when delayed, justice can turn pain into answers, doubt into certainty, and fear into a measure of peace. Now I want to hear from you. Do you believe that delayed justice is still justice? Share your thoughts in the comment below. Let's talk about it. And if this story moved you, subscribe to Dr. Investigation and turn on the notifications. Here, you'll find more real stories marked by mystery, tragedy, and the relentless search for truth. Share this video so that more people can learn about Mandy Stavik's story and reflect on the impact a single crime can have on a family, a community, and the world. Because in the end, remembering is not just telling a story. It's giving a voice to those who can no longer speak.